What do you think is unique about the message of Bitcoin for Gen Z?
Most Gen Zers just want to feel like adults, and feeling like an adult comes with ownership, being able to own your house, being able to start a family. It's just tough to do when your money is broken.
Getting to at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. is a very high honor. What did it feel like for you to actually get to speak that truth on stage?
The message to policymakers just in general is that Bitcoin is not crypto. Bitcoin is the internet, and altcoins are just websites.
Welcome back to Hosting Bitcoin. This is the show where we explore the people who are shaping the future of freedom, finance, and sovereignty around the world. And our guest today is proof that you don't need a decade in the game to make waves in this movement. Gen ZBTC is quickly becoming one of the most recognizable young voices and brands in Bitcoin. He brings sharp insights, a grounded presence, and a whole new generation into the conversation around Bitcoin. Whether he's fielding questions at the family dinner table or showing up in Washington, D.C. as a voice for truth, Gen Z is building bridges between generations, between memes and meaning, and between idealism and action. Gen Z BTC, welcome to Hosting Bitcoin. It's an honor to have you here.
What's up? What's up? Good to see you guys. Thank you for having me. And I'm just super excited to talk to you.
So I was super impressed. My whole team was super impressed. We got a chance to meet you at BTC in DC this past week. It was such a ton of fun. You are an amazing speaker, and I think you've got a really powerful message for the people in Gen Z, really for everybody. But I would love to know, just to set the tone and a little bit of background information for people, how did you get into Bitcoin before you were known in the space and very public with your thoughts and speaking to your generation? How did this come into your life?
It started way back, might have been 2018 or 2019. It was my start to investing, my intro to investing. And I started out on WallStreetBets, right? I started out as a pure degen. All right. Now we're educated. Now we have discipline and long time horizons. But back in the day when I first started, I was buying options on GameStop and AMC, which is a crazy place to start investing. But I tell people it's a lot like gambling, right? When you first start gambling, they let you win the first one so that you get hooked and then you want to do some more, right? So the first one's free. I made money on my options with GameStop and on AMC, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm a genius trader. I know what's going on, right? I can do this. And it all, went downhill from there until, of course, I found Bitcoin. So the WallStreetBets guys taught me very few fundamentals, right? It was mostly pumpdamentals and a little bit of nonsense and a little bit of fake technical analysis. I don't really know what they were doing over there, but I was eating it up. And then on that same Reddit page, I did find someone talking about Bitcoin. This was prior to all the stimulus of 2020 and 2021, right? So Bitcoin's price was still in 4 digits, right, back then. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to diversify my portfolio and hold a little bit of Bitcoin as well. Don't really know what this thing is, but they're talking about it. So I'm going to get into it. Things run up. Again, I feel like a genius. I've got all my money on Voyager at the time, and I didn't know anything about how Bitcoin was special, how it was different from other cryptocurrencies, how it was this powerful tool that you can hold yourself, self-custody, all these different things. Long story short, Voyager ends up going under. Everything starts crashing. I was trying to diamond hands everything, including all my garbage altcoins, which are no more. And I was taught a valuable lesson at that time, because I was also spreading a lot of misinformation to my friends and people that I wanted to help, right? Because I had made so much money that I was like, guys, you got to download Voyager. You get $20 of Bitcoin, do this, do that, buy this, buy that. And I wasn't telling people to study. I wasn't telling people to learn or to educate themselves. And that's where the biggest issue came. I had no education. So after the great crash, we go through the crypto winter. I decided to start researching Bitcoin, educating myself on Bitcoin, seeing where Bitcoin could go, because it didn't go to zero. It just went to about 16,000 and it starts trending back up. So I get curious and I start watching YouTube. I start reading podcasts. I'm on Reddit again, but in the slightly better corners of Reddit. I'm not on Wall Street Bets. And I'm reading all this different stuff, all these op-eds, all these frequently asked questions. And eventually it just clicks for me one day. And I'll always give the credit to the same person. It was Yoni Appelberg, Swedish content creator. He does little Bitcoin animations. He had a video titled like how Bitcoin mining works or something. And that was the dagger. It clicked and never looked back since then. I realized that it's one of the greatest inventions or discoveries of all time. Bitcoin's the greatest discovery of all time. And the day I really discovered how different it was, it felt like Christmas. It almost felt like Christmas. I couldn't sleep. So never look back. And I feel like I just have an obligation to try to help other people to understand why Bitcoin is different.
Man, that's a beautiful story. And I wish that we could all say that we were wise enough to see what Bitcoin was from the very beginning and get right into it and skip all the drama of meme coins and altcoins and other names that we might call them depending on the day.
Yep.
But I was the same, years in which my primary focus was finding the next Bitcoin or,
Hmm.
spending time looking at all the things being built on Ethereum. And it took a lot of hours of research and plenty of years of experience to realize, oh, all of this is pretty much garbage. I mean, with few exceptions, most of this is not worth paying attention to. And it usually takes people a personal experience or two before they have that light bulb moment. So was your personal experience part of what got you to start creating content?
Yeah, for sure. Because I did not want to have anyone else lose money because all their money was tied up in an exchange or something like that. And I also didn't really want people to lose money by missing out on the opportunity cost of Bitcoin because you think that you're going to find Bitcoin number two, right? And like you said, everyone has their own journey and it's typically a bumpy road. I mean, I had a lot of Doge, and I was buying more Doge when Elon was going on SNL. I was like, oh, this is going to pump the price. I had no idea what buy the rumor, sell the news was. You know what I mean? I didn't get it. I got smoked on that trade. That was horrible. But, things like that happen. But as you gain experience in the space, you want to tell people about how it goes. But it's a lot like, and I say this, I have no kids, but I feel like it's a lot like raising kids. Sometimes they genuinely have to just make the mistake themselves. You can tell them a million times, but they're probably still going to do it. That's just how life is. And experience is a pretty good teacher. So once you get burned once, you're probably not going to touch the stove twice. Right. So that's pretty much how I learned the hard way about Bitcoin. Right. And I wish that there was more resources, more places I could have gone to learn about how it all works and why it's a little bit different a little bit sooner. Maybe, no guarantee, but maybe I would have made different decisions. So that's why I want to be a young content creator explaining all this stuff to people, trying to make it make sense for them, breaking it down in my own unique kind of way.
So Gen ZBTC, it's your handle. I would imagine it's the generation that you belong to. And just by its nature, it's probably who you're speaking to most often. What do you think is unique about the message of Bitcoin for Gen Z? What do you think Bitcoin uniquely solves for Gen Z? And how do you feel like it's typically received? I mean, we make fun of how boomers get Bitcoin, but there's all sorts of levels of understanding that people don't appreciate that even among young people, this is still a very niche topic. So what's your experience been like in speaking to this audience?
Yeah, if we're going based on the numbers, my channel actually, most of my viewers are not Gen Zers, which I need to try to figure out how to fix. I think I need to make short form content. All the Gen Zers have their brains fried. So I need to make 30-second clips and not 3-minute videos. But most of my audience is actually millennial or Gen X. So even at the conference, I'm sure you'll agree, we were at the DC conference together, and most of the people there are not Gen Zers, right? Most of them are either elder millennials, right? They're up there. They're like 36, 37-ish, within that range. And then, let's call it 35 to 45. I would say that's the bulk of Bitcoiners at large in the world in general. And most conferences and places that you go to, you're going to find that age range, I think, more often than any other 10-year gap. And I just find that interesting, right? But as it relates to Gen Zers and why it's relevant to Gen Zers, how it's different for Gen Zers, it's because every generation that comes into the world has to deal with more inflation than the previous generation, right? So even as Gen Zers, the Gen Alpha, the people who are currently like 10, 11, 12, whatever, those guys actually have it even worse than we do. Um, and it's because inflation is compounding. So what I try to tell to all the younger people is that you're doing all the right things. You're going to school, you're getting your job, you're getting your degree, you're maybe even working in your field, and then you still feel like you can't get ahead, or that things are being taken away from you, things are out of reach and they're unachievable. You don't have a lot of hope for the future, and you become this doomer young person. There's a lot of doomer young people. And when I say the word doomer, it's the idea of there being no way out for you. You're in a rat race that you cannot escape, and it does not get any better. It just stays like this until you die, right? And that's a very hopeless situation to be in, right? That's why we see, suicide rates amongst Gen Zers being extremely high. That's why we see all these different polls coming out from Reuters or from really any financial think tank, talking about how 50% of Gen Zers believe that they'll never be able to own a home, or they'll never be able to have kids. And then we're seeing that actually being reflected in the birth rates, right? So we have birth rates as if we are in a collapsing society, which in a way we are, right? Because when your money is collapsing, your society is going to be collapsing as well. And that's pretty much what we're seeing. We're seeing people not being able to have ownership of their lives, right? Most Gen Zers just want to feel like adults, and feeling like an adult comes with ownership, being able to own your house, own a car, being able to start a family, right? Have kids, and just do the whole 9 yards. And it's just tough to do when your money is broken. But people don't know that. They just think that it's the greedy corporations. Every corporation is just super greedy and they're just taking all my money, or it's the super greedy immigrants taking all my money, or it's all the super greedy whatever taking all my whatever, right? So that's the trap that we kind of fall into, the narratives that we fall into, and they're believable, right? They're believable, and we can extrapolate them out to a wide range of people to blame. But the simple answer really is just that you're making the money less rare by printing trillions of it every day, and now you can buy less stuff, and it's really that simple, right? You can make it more detailed, but if you break it down, that's what's happening. The money is being debased, and because of that, everything else becomes out of reach. Bitcoin can't be debased, so everything is within reach on a Bitcoin standard.
So you said this, you mentioned it a little bit before, that in a way Gen Z's wired for Bitcoin. Like they have the most to gain in many ways from realizing that this is one of the few ways out, if not the only way out, of an increasingly rigged game board that they're unfortunately in the position of pointing at the other players in the game more so than pointing at the game itself. But affectionately called TikTok brain, they've got this affliction of, short attention spans, ton going on in the world. It's tough to pay attention to any one thing and go really deep on it. What do you feel like is standing in the way of mass understanding of Gen Z of what this asset is?
Um, Part of it is just the fact that Bitcoin is complicated, right? And the reason why it's complicated is because Bitcoin covers so many different things. If you ask someone what is Bitcoin, I asked multiple people this. I actually should have asked you as well. Maybe we'll do it at the end. But I asked so many different people at the conference, what is Bitcoin? And I recorded their response. No one gave the same answer twice, right? So that can be seen as a problem for people on the outside. And it's because it's this versatile, flexible thing. It makes it kind of hard to understand, right?
Mm.
So if as we're native to the internet at this point, but if you ask someone what is the internet and to explain it, someone might say, oh, it's cat videos. Some people might say it's Instagram. Some people might say it's YouTube. Some people might say it's emails. Some people might say it's a website, right? So it's hard to say what is the internet. The same way it's hard to say what is Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is the internet of money. So that's maybe the first issue. It's just too many things, even though it's really one thing, which is money. And I think the second thing is we're never taught what money is at all. And we don't know what the problem is. So people call Bitcoin, it's a solution in search of a problem. It's a whatever in search of a, whatever, which is, again, just a talking point that they heard on Twitter. They don't even know what that means. You know what I mean? They don't even know what that means when they say it.
How many
And
people have you heard say the word intrinsic value that don't know what intrinsic
yeah,
value means?
no, 100%. Talking point, buzzword. There's levels to this. There's people who know buzzwords, and there's people who understand concepts, right? So if you're an intrinsic value type person or whatever it is, then you understand buzzwords. You don't really understand concepts, but it's okay. You know what I mean? There's education that is needed for stuff like this, and we're not taught any of this. All right. And if you are taught any of it, let's say you went to university, maybe you went to George Washington University, right? And you decide to study economics or finance or macro, and the topic of Bitcoin comes up, and your egotistical professor is just talking about how it's going to zero any day now. He's been teaching at the university for 20 years, and for his whole tenure, he's been telling all his classes it's going to zero any day now. Why does he still have a job? I don't know, but that's just how it goes. And we are we are experiencing a paradigm shift, right? It's hard to get people on board to something so transformational. It just takes time. It just takes a lot of education. But one, Bitcoin is very versatile, and two, we don't even know what the problem is because we're never taught about money. So those are probably the two biggest things, and it's just going to take time. Hopefully, with more podcasts like this, maybe we can get on some bigger platforms. People continue to see the number go up technology, which is Bitcoin's number one advertising campaign. All these things put together eventually will lead us onto a Bitcoin standard. Just takes time.
So, when you're the person who understands this in your friend group, in your family, in your place of work, it can easily get lonely. What's your experience been like of being the Bitcoin guy in your circle of influence?
Yeah, no, pretty much everywhere you go, you're going to be the only Bitcoin guy. But the silver lining to this is one, you are the beacon of knowledge and education and expertise when someone does have a question about Bitcoin, makes you feel kind of important and validated. So that's cool. And two, in the future, in our lifetimes, we'll be alive to experience this. If we assume that we'll live for another 50 years, there will be no more Bitcoin guys. The same way there is no like, oh, he's the internet guy. Like, what? Everybody uses the internet. What are you talking about? You know what I mean? He doesn't have any sort of special expertise or something. Maybe if you're a coder, then maybe, right? But even that won't be special in the future. Everyone's going to be vibe coding, and it'll actually work the right way. So it's hard, right? So you might feel a little bit isolated or like you're a little bit of a weirdo, strange person at first, but following the mission of being a Bitcoiner and being a Bitcoin educator is more important, and it's cooler than being a normie, quote unquote, who kind of goes with the crowd, who's hanging out with the other sheeple, right? So there's nothing wrong with embracing the fact that you see something that the other people around you cannot see yet. That's called being a visionary. So you should embrace that. You should realize that Bitcoin is a designer brand, right? Bitcoin is sexy. Bitcoin is cool, right? Having one Bitcoin is cooler than owning a Lamborghini, right? And people don't realize it yet, but it just is, right? There's going to be a point where you can buy a Lambo with 1/10 of one Bitcoin, right? So again, these things just take time, but if you're able to see it early, it puts you in a position that's way ahead of everybody else who is focused on a bunch of other different things. They were trying to be a day trader on Tesla, or they were chasing, trying to buy rare Pokemon cards on Whatnot. You know what I mean? That's a whole nother thing that we can talk about in a second. But when your money's broken, you turn into a degenerate society of people who are just trying to gamble on everything every single day. And that's its own problem, you know? So, yeah, people at work, they know me as Mr. Bitcoin. You know what I mean? A lot of my family members know me. Oh, he's the Bitcoin guy. My friends literally know me. Oh, he's a Bitcoin guy. You know, I'm wearing Bitcoin hats. I'm wearing Bitcoin shirt. I got my Bitcoin Crocs. You know what I mean? I don't know. You know, I just rock Bitcoin merch because I think it's cool. It sends a silent signal to people that, hey, I really do this. If you have any questions, come talk to me about it. And it started conversations before. I've worn a Bitcoin shirt to the gym. Someone's come up to me and talked to me about it like on 2 different occasions. One guy was an Ethereum dude. He was talking trash. Another guy was actually Bitcoiner. So you never know. It's just interesting thing. So double down on it. You know, be the Bitcoin guy. Embrace being the Bitcoin guy because that makes you extremely rare.
When you're out and I mean, in a way, just by wearing merch like that, like you're soliciting a reaction, right? How often are those reactions curious and positive versus people who are just ready to annihilate you or argue against you? And how do you approach it? I mean, when you're especially in the seat of an educator, it's a decision to every time, am I going to invest effort into this person, or are they just looking to be contrarian for contrarian's sake, not because they actually want to learn something?
Yeah, no, it's tough. Even today, you know, I was explaining how I'm going on this podcast talking about Bitcoin because I met you at the conference, right? And some girl, she was like, oh, well, my friend, he's a day trader. And he was saying that, you know, you shouldn't just hold Bitcoin and keep buying it. You need to exit at certain times and do this. And I'm like, okay, first off, I'm trying to be nice. All right. First off, I can almost guarantee you your friend is not profitable. All right. You do not know his trades. Most traders are not profitable. It's not that he's dumb or anything, but most traders are just not profitable. That's just how it is. So that's the first thing. And secondly, I'm not a trader. I'm an investor. We look long term. We think in 4-year horizons, bare minimum. And also, you're not selling your Bitcoin for more dollars. There's a difference, right? Bitcoin's very different from any other stuff. And there's things like that that happen almost every single day. You know, people will poke fun. They'll say, oh, look, it's Mr. Ethereum, right? They'll make a joke. It's like, no, I'm actually Mr. Bitcoin. You know this. Come on now. Don't play with me. And it's just, you know, at this point, I'm at the point where I really don't take it too serious because the cool thing about being a Bitcoiner is that you're on the side of the truth. And the truth doesn't have to do anything except stay true. And you just keep winning. You know what I mean? The truth doesn't need to be defended or anything like that. The truth merely needs to be released and then it does all the work for you. So I really don't have to do anything. All I have to do is yap about what Bitcoin is. And I just continue to get richer and more powerful and more famous and more notoriety and more people want to talk to me because it's just the truth. So shout out to the truth. You know, the truth is really what sets us free. And Bitcoin literally gives you freedom of choice, freedom of whether you're going to stay at your job that you hate, you know, freedom to start your own business, freedom to own analog assets that you might want to own, like a house or like a car or like a boat, whatever. So Bitcoin is freedom because Bitcoin is the truth. Bitcoin is a truth machine, right? So
Hmm.
that's really all I can say on that point. So I try to be pretty nice about it to people, but it comes a certain point where I hit them with the famous Satoshi line, which is, you know, if you don't get it or you don't believe me, I don't really have time to explain it to you. Sorry. I genuinely, I'm sorry. You know, you'll get it eventually. It's just, I don't know.
Everybody gets it at the price they deserve. Or,
Yeah.
I heard someone say it recently. I'm forgetting. I wish I could credit you. I'm so sorry. But he said it's not just you get it at the price you deserve. It's you get it when you're willing to admit that you were wrong. I just remembered it was Matt from Unchained. Shout out to Matt from Unchained of you get it at the price you're willing to admit that you were wrong.
Yeah. No, for sure. And again, how hard is it to say that you've been duped or that you've been tricked or that you've been wrong about something? And the irony is not lost on me. Anyone can say the same thing and turn it around on Bitcoiners. You know what I mean? When are you going to admit that you're wrong and that gold is superior? Or when are you going to admit that Caspa is superior or XRP is superior? I guess I'll admit it when they're not shrinking relative to Bitcoin over 4 year, 5 year, 10 year periods. Maybe then you might have a case or a leg to stand on or something. But the market can be irrational, but I don't think it's going to be irrational for 16 years running. On top of that, right, when we talk fundamentals, just look into what makes Bitcoin special. And finally, when we talk about money, right, what is money? Money has certain properties. Let's compare those properties to all the altcoins. Let's compare those properties to all of the physical metals. And then let's compare those properties to Bitcoin. We end up coming to this same conclusion, right, that Bitcoin just has the superior monetary properties. And as long as those stay the same, which they will, because Bitcoin is extremely hard to change, and it would be in the economic best interest of every holder to keep those properties the same, Bitcoin will continue to beat all the other things. So if you're holding on to hope that one day all the Bitcoiners will just be wrong and that we're just all arrogant fools, then I have bad news. You know what I mean? I have really bad news, but you might not believe me. So time will tell, because again, Bitcoin's a truth machine. So I guess we just have to wait and see. Continue seeing, rather. We'll have to continue seeing. So I don't know. It's up to you. It's your own life. So that's all I can say.
And I completely agree with you. This is a truth machine. And it's one thing to get a chance to express your truth to people in your environment, to people on social media, but getting to at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. is a very high honor. So, what did it feel like for you to get the chance to do that, to actually get to speak that truth on stage in one of the power centers of the world?
Yeah, this is going to be a long rant. I'll try to keep it a little short, but you guys need to understand that I'm currently in my mom's basement making YouTube videos, doing interviews, whatever. And I was able to go from that to speaking at the Kennedy Center, right? This prestigious place. I was hanging around a bunch of famous people, right? Famous Bitcoiners, right? And I was able to get signed books from authors who I've read their content. You know what I mean? I've been able to hang out with, high level podcasters in the space. I'm able to hang out with some of the Bitcoin baddies. You know what I mean? There's some good looking ladies in Bitcoin. You know what I mean? So there's just a lot of great things that came from me making videos. So you never know who's going to see your content. That's the first thing I want to say. Be a creator and just put out the stuff that you want to make. Doesn't have to even be Bitcoin related. Just put out your stuff. Then to be able to go to DC, when the guy DM'd me, shout out to John, right, with Sovereign. Shout out to John. He DM'd me because he was working in coordination with George Washington University and the professor Aurelian, who was putting on the event. And I'm like, okay, this is a bot account. You know what I mean? Who is this kid? Barely has any followers. You know what I mean? I have more followers than John on Twitter. So I'm like, all right, this guy is clearly a very unserious person. So sorry, bro. I can't help you. You know what I mean? Then he like kind of follows up with me and he's like, no, like we want you to come speak at the thing. And I was like, do you have some credentials I could see? Or like, is there someone you can connect me to that I could see via email or something? I don't know. Cause I really thought I was getting scammed. Then after maybe a few days, he does, provide all the info and all the little proof and all the whatever. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Someone's actually asking me to come speak at a conference. This is so good. So basically, it was a very cool experience. Got to meet a lot of cool people. And of course, the internet's where we get a lot of our outreach. But just being able to be on stage, right? It's almost it's legitimizing. People get to see that, and they're like, oh yeah, he was up there with, this person, that person. He shared the same stage as Sailor. You know what I mean? All this different stuff. It was just cool. So great opportunity. Shout out to George Washington University. Shout out to BTC in DC. And one, I want to go back. I'm sure they'll do it next year. So you got to have me as a speaker twice. Come on now. And then I want to target some more conferences. The Bitcoin conference is in Vegas. I live here. Come on, it just makes sense. It all makes sense. So I'm just super happy to have been able to do that. I went back to work today. Everyone's like, "Oh, how was your conference? How was your thing? Was you, you know what I mean, did you give a good little speech?" They didn't really know what it was. They just knew I was going to DC. And then I showed them the photos and they're like, "Dang, bro, you're fresh. You got your suit on. Oh my gosh, you were on stage. I didn't know it was that major." And I was like, "Yeah, it's pretty legit." So it just, again, being the Bitcoin guy, eventually you will be validated, right? So I would recommend that you, if you're comfortable with it, openly be the Bitcoin person, right? Because you're either going to get validated with the price, right? Whenever there's a new all-time high, people are going to be like, "Oh my gosh, the Bitcoin guy was right. It's at an all-time high. He's probably rich right now," And two, you might end up doing cool stuff like speaking on stage at the Kennedy Center, and then everyone thinks that you're a big shot. So just be the Bitcoin guy.
Have you ever felt like you've done everything right, built the business, made smart investments, and yet there's still one piece missing? If you're someone who believes in Bitcoin but hasn't yet explored mining, let me introduce you to something that most people never even realize exists, and that is fully managed Bitcoin mining with Abundant Mines. We help high net worth individuals like you own industrial grade mining infrastructure without ever touching the machines. It's hands free, professionally hosted, and designed to generate passive income by turning electricity into Bitcoin every single day. It's tax advantaged, it's asset backed, and for many of our clients, it's become one of the smartest moves that they've ever made in their investing career. So if you're ready to take the next step into real Bitcoin ownership, not just holding, but producing it at a discount, visit abundantminds.com. That's abundantminds.com and see why this strategy is changing the game for serious investors. What I find is, this is such a remote digital worldwide community. So most of the time when we're taking in information, we're making connections, it's in our own kind of isolated environment, unless you've got a local meetup group. And so going to events like this, there's usually some kind of movement of consciousness that happens there, whether it's a single takeaway, a connection you make, some kind of shift in perspective. I'm curious if there was anything for you that stood out about this event. Did you leave changed in some way? Was there something in particular that kind of hit home for you out of this event?
In terms of Bitcoin, right? It was something that Mark Moss had said, right? Because a lot of people are going to have this criticism. They're going to say, "Oh, BTC and DC, you guys are going over there to bend the knee to all the lawmakers and all the bankers." And Mark Moss made an important point to be like, "No, we're not asking permission. We're actually telling them what they need to do." Right. We're giving them guidance on how to actually do the right thing surrounding Bitcoin. We're telling people what they need to know about Bitcoin and how it's different from other crypto so that they don't mess up or misstep with things that they say or with the legislation that they try to bring forward. Right. We're planting the seeds for the roadmap of the 21st century. We're making sure that everything goes smoothly, everything goes the right way. We're actually imposing our will onto the people who are going to be making some of the decisions or writing up some of the policy. And that's what Bitcoin's all about, right? Bitcoin's not about asking for permission. It's about using your free will and just doing stuff. Right. So that's really what BTC and DC was all about. It was about doing things, making things happen, being a shaker and a mover, being a decision maker. So that's what we were there doing. And I thought that was really cool. And that's a really good point because people like to say, well, the ETFs are taking over Bitcoin. So now all the whales control the Bitcoin price action and we don't really have a say in anything. And it's whatever. I'm like, dude, we cannot cope like that for our whole lives. You got to stop that. At the end of the day, Bitcoiners really are the decision makers. We are carving out our future. I mean, we make the rules. Shout out to Max Kaiser. If you control the money, you control everything. You make the rules. Bitcoiners control the money now. You know what I mean? So we make the rules. And if you don't like that, then you should probably become a Bitcoiner and then see where you can try to steer the protocol. And if you can generate consensus amongst the masses, then you can control the narrative. But if you're on the sidelines talking about how, oh, it's over and Bitcoin's this and Bitcoin's that, it's co-opted, it's whatever, then all right, that sounds good. You can stay over there. We're going to continue moving Bitcoin where it needs to go. And you can just cry, I guess. I don't really know.
is there something, and I love what you just said about what Mark Moss said and Max Kaiser. Is there something that you heard at the event, or even that you said, that you wish made it into the ears of policymakers, whether they were there at the event or unfortunately they were unable to attend because the government got shut down and they could no longer go? What do you feel like the message to policymakers should have been if they were listening?
The message to policymakers, just in general, is that Bitcoin is not crypto. That is extremely important to understand. And I'll go as far as to say that pretty much every crypto is going to zero. But let's just say I'm wrong and that some of them don't go to zero. Bitcoin is the internet, and altcoins are just websites. And that's fine. We love websites. Websites are cool. Some of them are scammy. Some of them are full of malware. Some of them are full of ads that piss us off. Some of them are very useful. So there's going to be websites on the internet, and you need to understand what the internet actually is. All right. So you don't need to pass a pets.com infrastructure bill. You need to pass an internet bill, right? You need to pass a fiber optic cable bill, right? So that you can push internet adoption and internet usage, right? You don't want to push a bill for one website. That would be very stupid. And that's really what could happen if we're not careful, right? We want to make sure people understand actually Bitcoin is the internet. Everything else is just a website. Everything else is just a hosting site. Everything else is just a tiny little piece of what the internet actually is. So Bitcoin is not crypto. Bitcoin is not crypto. Crypto is more fiat than anything. Bitcoin is its own separate thing. So if people understand that, then they're on the right path.
I think the comparisons to the internet, regardless of the context, are really helpful for people to grasp what this is, how important it is. And it's the closest analog to something that we've had relatively recently that at the time that big decisions are being made about it, most people still don't understand it. And
Mm-hmm.
I was reminded by people who work in policy that the internet was going to be successful regardless, but you could have opted the benefits out for your constituents. You could shield yourselves from benefiting from it, but you can't shut it off at the expense of everybody else. And so in many ways, good regulation, although we don't necessarily need it for the space to survive, the technology to survive, is a force for unleashing more and more resources, more talent, more energy, more capital to go and actually be a part of the space. And in many ways, not regulating or over regulating in the wrong direction is a huge stifling of the impact that we can have. It doesn't kill the space, but can slow it down or keep it from reaching its potential for a longer period of time. But if we can get intelligent frameworks around it that make it very clear to TradFi, essentially like the legacy world, what it is they're dealing with. It was expressed to me that there's so much capital sitting on the sidelines just waiting for some semblance of clarity. And if you look back to early internet regulations, it was clarity in how it was going to be treated in several different areas that unleashed just a massive wave of people getting involved. So, as much as we don't need them, it's really helpful if they understand what this is and get it right the first time when they're going through and writing some of these laws.
Yeah, and that's again what we're here to guide them on. You don't want to do any harm because you can hurt your constituents by being the anti-Bitcoin person, the anti-internet person, right? On top of that, right, more, or rather, less importantly than hurting your constituents, you will be remembered genuinely as an idiot. And maybe you weren't actually an idiot. Maybe someone who was very charming and convincing told you something in your ear that you believed, and you didn't do enough vetting of that person, and then you make a decision I'm not the one making the choice to call you mean names. You'll be called mean names for a very long time, and you're probably going to get voted out. So it's just a lot of negative things can come from making that political misstep, and you really want to avoid that because they're going to look back the same way that we do all the people who were anti-electricity or anti-phone. You know what I mean? There were people who were anti-everything. They're anti-bicycles. You know what I mean? They were too dangerous and they were demonic and they were evil. You know, they said the same thing about the Walkman. They said the same thing about the TV and like everything. Right. And maybe there's just a little bit of truth to each one of these things, but the benefits outweigh the cost, right? Are you really going to be the guy who sits there and says, yeah, you know what? Some people get shocked by electricity, so we're not going to use any electricity. You're going to be front of a newspaper headline one of these days, and they're going to say, look at this goof who once said that the internet was so dangerous or that the electricity was so dangerous, right? We laugh at people like that. People like that aren't even taken seriously. We don't even remember their names. You know what I mean? We just remember that they said stupid things. So I would rather you not be that person, right? So that's kind of important to your ego, right? And to your legacy. So you don't want that to happen. Um, and then, yeah, you know, we there's an air of legitimacy that comes with framework or from legislation or from policy, right? And even though Bitcoin's already, in my opinion, it's legitimized itself very well. It was legitimized as soon as the code was released. But if you want to be safe in your investment, or if you have capital on the side because you're just a little bit uncertain of the future and how things will go, and maybe the next administration might come in and try to undo certain things or whatever it might be, policy, legislation, bills being able to kind of interweave Bitcoin into the system, make it hard to undo that because now you have a lot of constituents who have their money wrapped up in strategy and other Bitcoin treasury companies. You've got money tied up in the ETF. You've got money tied up in your 401k. You've got money tied up in the S&P 500 because strategy might join the S&P, you know, and you've got all these different layers and avenues where people are either directly or indirectly exposed to Bitcoin. And if you want to undo all of that, there's going to be a lot of pushback from a lot of very powerful people, right? Because the powerful people hold control of the money. The Bitcoiners are in control of most of the Bitcoin. So you're pushing it back against these people who have a lot of influence. They're probably going to make a lot of noise because you're not giving them anything. You're just taking stuff away, right? America is a country all about giving freedoms and giving rights and giving this and giving that, creating this. And if you start trying to take something away or walk something back, it's not a good look. First, it's very anti-American, and two, you're picking a wrong fight. You're barking up the wrong tree. You're messing with the people who have control of all the capital. Not a good idea. Probably won't end too well. And that's really all I can say. You know, so I think that people will continue to put Bitcoin into more products, right? And as Bitcoin finds its way, it sneaks its way into more of these financial products. We create new products, all these different things. It's hard to walk back or undo any of this stuff. So people might be waiting for these things, and that's totally fine. It's your money. You can do what you want. But the more you wait and wait and wait and wait, it's not an opportunity really anymore. It's just the common sense thing to do. You know, the S&P 500, the QQQ, they're not like the greatest investment opportunities of all time. Like they're not some shocking revelation. It's kind of just common sense for the average person, right? Because it's no longer a good idea. When ETFs were first made, it was a good idea to start buying some ETFs. But now it's kind of just, it's mundane. It's boring. Everybody agrees. There's no more, well, the upside is not as great, right? So Bitcoin, because it's novel, it's a great idea to get in early, right? So that's why we want to do all these things now while we can.
For the people who see that we went to a conference in DC and say it it doesn't matter if you show up in places like that, what do you say to that person who just says there's a waste of time to go and try to put forth any message in a place like that?
Well, one, I would ask them, well, why do you think that? You know what I mean? Where should we be talking? You know what I mean? Whoa, should we just be on Twitter Spaces all the time forever? You know what I mean? Like, and Twitter Spaces are great. You know, they're cool, but there's also real life outside the internet. So, you know, we got to go touch grass, so to speak, right? And touching grass sometimes involves going to a conference in person. You know, it can be a big conference, it can be a small conference, it could be a local meetup, it could be a book club. There's a Bitcoin book club where I am. You know what I mean? There's all sorts of different ways that we can get involved personally and in real life. You know, you could go to your senator's office yourself physically, and you could try to talk to them. And part of doing stuff is going to DC to talk at the Kennedy Center and to talk at BTC in DC, right? So that's just you using your free will. Is it going to change the entire world in one day? No, but you never know who's listening, right? So just like how I got there through my YouTube channel, someone saw it. You might not know who's in the audience or who will see it on the YouTube channel later and who might be inspired or who might be interested or might be curious. So these things are all very important. And again, it's a level of legitimacy. Okay. If you put on a conference, again, it could be local, it could be small, there could be 100 people there, it could be 20 people there. But if you put on an event and you advertise it, you put it out there, you tell people, oh, you got to come and it's $5 at the door, you know what I mean? Or whatever you want to do. It's 5,000 Satoshis at the door. You are adding a level of legitimacy to your cause, you know, to your thing that you care about. And it just so happens that the BTC and DC one was pretty big, right? It was put on by a university and some professors and some lawmakers and some pretty high ranking people. They had some big sponsorships, but it all starts grassroots. You know what I mean? It all starts small. You know, even the Bitcoin conference in Vegas, it's not like they just got a bunch of money out of nowhere and they're just like, oh, we have the biggest conference in the world now for Bitcoin. No, it took a long time. It started out, no one was there. It was just empty auditoriums. No one cared. And it was just a bunch of losers and nobodies and nerds who were talking about this magic internet money that doesn't matter and doesn't exist. And now it's the biggest conference for Bitcoin in the world. And it's probably going to stay that way. And it's because they keep going. You know what I mean? They keep using their free will to push the narratives that they want to push. You know, if you don't like it, then it's probably time to start your own conference and start grinding that, right? Because BTC Prague, the BTC conference in Canada, the ones in the US, these didn't start out of nowhere. It was a lot of people getting together and deciding to use their free will to do stuff. So you got to use your free will and do stuff.
So we get the opportunity to talk to people in spaces like this. I know you've got your YouTube channel, which is probably where you impact the most people in kind of a longer, coherent thought form that they can pay attention to for more than 20 seconds. And you also said, when I got back to work. So are you, your YouTube channel is not your full-time gig. What did you come back to work to?
Yeah, if my YouTube channel was my full-time gig, I'd be living in a box. You know what I mean? My YouTube channel is very small. I only have 5,000 subs, which is very amazing. But if we're talking money, if I'm being very transparent, on a really good month, maybe I make $400. And on a normal month, I make like 150, right? So I'm not really there yet. I need some sponsorships or something. Abundant Minds, all right? Sponsorship incoming, I don't know. But my day job is I'm a logistics provider. I'm a freight broker. So I work in the office. You know, my office is pretty cool. And a lot of my team, they knew that I was going on this trip. So I had people watching and helping my customers while I was gone, which if you've ever done logistics or if you're in freight, if you're watching this, you know that you never actually go on vacation. I was responding to emails and taking calls and telling people, hey, don't do that, do this, you know, so it's tough. But I tried to enjoy my vacation as much as I could. And now that I'm back, a lot of people wanted to ask me, oh, what did you do in DC? Did you see stuff? Did you do anything? And I show them some of my photos and they find it very cool. Some people find it very inspiring too, because they know you've been the Bitcoin guy for over a year now since you've been working here. And now it feels like all the stuff you talked about is coming to fruition. We're at a new all-time high. You're speaking at events. You're doing all this cool stuff. Your channel is getting bigger. I'm very happy for you. I'm very proud of you. I'm very interested in what you're doing. You know what I mean? So that is my day job, right? And we can talk more about my day job. I would actually love to talk more about my day job because I've turned my day job into a Bitcoin job because some of my biggest customers are Hut 8, Clean Spark, right? TerraWolf.
Well, I mean, the reality is one of the most important things that we do that's kind of the unsung core competency as miners is a lot of logistics. I mean, you're moving heavy, delicate things all around the world, often overseas between facilities without breaking them. Making sure that something arrives safely, and it's something that we don't pay much attention to. It goes unnoticed because as long as it works, it's just happening and it's part of your core business that needs to happen on a daily basis. But it's not something that you put into marketing. But it's like the pipes, it's the veins that run through the body of the network are how you move something from point A to point B. And I just love that you're making a non-Bitcoin job into a Bitcoin job just by choosing the right clients.
Yeah. And like as someone who has my own book of business, you kind of get to choose who you go after. You try to generate your own leads sometimes, right? And I'm like, man, HUD 8 is not in our system. So let me try to find some of these guys on LinkedIn or something and maybe reach out to them and just say, hey, I'm a big time investor in your company. I love Bitcoin. I love what you guys are doing by securing the network. How can I be a part of your mission and make your life a little bit easier? Right. And that's exactly what I did to close HUD 8. So shout out to them. Shout out to Bryce. Bryce is amazing. He's like the senior logistics guy over there. I'd be talking to him about like college football, stuff like that. I don't even watch those sports, you know what I mean? But I just be chopping them up, and then we move freight and we do our thing. And I just love it, and it's like, hey, I'm a Bitcoin guy. Your other freight providers probably think that you're moving computers. You know what I mean? They don't really get it. So that's one, a level that we're connected on. And two, I understand that you're probably going to need high value insurance on your stuff. I understand that some of that stuff is delicate. I can tell the drivers not to overstrap so they're not damaging ASICs. If you need tracking on your shipment, yeah, we got that. I know that these get stolen a lot. Something got stolen out in California airport recently. Wasn't mine, but it was a news story. You know what I mean? I tell my customers, hey, this is going on in the news right now. This miner's shipment was stolen. Here's what I can do to make sure that your shipments never get stolen. Here's a security form. Here's this, here's that. And, we're providing this like tailor-made solution to these guys, which is cool, but it's just another level when you know that the person you're working with is a Bitcoiner. And this is something that's really important for anyone who's a business owner of any kind. If you are a yoga instructor, if you are a personal fitness trainer, if you are a dentist, if you are a whatever, if you're a Bitcoin, whatever you are, if you are a Bitcoin person and you're embracing that and you have your Bitcoin accepted here sign and you tell everybody that you love Bitcoin and all this other stuff, me personally, if it's between driving to the normal spot and going to your Bitcoin place, even if it's, 5 miles further, I'm going to you every single time. I'm going to you every single time because Bitcoiners are just a little bit more trustworthy. Why is that? Multiple reasons. But if I were to put it in one sentence, Bitcoiners are a little bit more unplugged than the average person, right? They're a little bit more out of the matrix than the average person. So I just feel like whatever you're selling, whatever you're doing, whatever you're telling me, I do believe it just a little bit more. Even though we're supposed to verify, don't trust, right? Don't trust, verify. Even though we're supposed to do that, if I were to trust anyone, I would trust the Bitcoiner over the other person who's not a Bitcoiner.
Well, I've had an absolute blast getting a chance to talk to you. As we get toward the end of our time together, I got one more question for you. And then I want to point people to where they can find you. We can pump those numbers up so you get more and more subscribers to your YouTube channel. Uh, my last question for you is that there's going to be a point in the future where today's Gen Z is the equivalent of the boomer generation. And we all have our feelings about how we think the world is and what was caused by the boomer generation, right or wrong. There's ways of looking at that. What do you hope that Gen Z has accomplished by the time that they get to be the age of the current boomer generation?
Man, that is a really big question. But one thing I hope, and to be fair, this is not going to happen. That's just the way life is. But I hope that when we're the boomers, that the young generation won't hate us to death. And they probably will. That's just the way life is, and it's unfortunate. I'm going to try to avoid that as best I can, but there's really no avoiding that. The young generation will probably just be a little bit bitter or upset with the boomer Gen Zers when the time does come. And that's just the way life is, right? The way life goes is the boomers, the old people of the generation, say that the young people of today are not that bright and they're kind of weird. And that is true for like a lot of them. But there's always going to be people who rise up, who lead the generation, because the boomers at one point, they were young and there were boomers who called them lazy and weird and idiots. And eventually there were a bunch of people who rose up and they did what they had to do, and they led their generation through whatever issues and trials and tribulations, and then they made it. Right, every generation has their own struggles and their own issues. We're going to have very unique struggles and very unique issues, right? In terms of AI, you know what I mean, in terms of environmental stuff, in terms of money, right, inflation, right, in terms of societal degradation. We have a lot of it's a societal division. We have a lot of very unique issues that we have to figure out, and we're going to. Otherwise, you're going to go extinct. And if you think all the people on Earth won't be around in 20, 30 years, then I guess none of this really matters. But the truth is, we probably will be around, and we will overcome and figure out all the different issues that we have to face. So all I can say is I hope that the Gen Zers are able to stay the course and stay humble and continue stacking their sats. And, at the end of the day, we're all going to make it. We're all going to make it. We just have to stay on the course, stay consistent, be a beacon of education, be a helpful person. We don't have to be the ones who are being, I guess, arrogant or negative about it all the time. We want to try to be hopeful, right? Maybe that'll help the younger generation to look up to us rather than to resent us. They'll look at us as beacons of hope, people who were actually useful and who educated and who kind of looked out for them and tried to look after them and maybe save some Satoshis to pass on to them, because you can't take it with you when you die. Unless you can upload your consciousness into cyberspace, then maybe you can. I don't know. But until then, we just have to try to be useful to people, be useful to the people in your generation, and then be useful to the people who are coming up next, right? Because they're going to take over, and you want to at least have the world in good hands. So try to help that next generation as much as you can.
Man, beautifully put. I think everybody who's listening to this should consider following you on social media, on your YouTube channel. You are an incredibly eloquent speaker. I really appreciate the energy that you bring to education, to advocacy. Really, honestly, just very impressed by you. Where can people keep up with what you're working on, your content, get in touch with you if you like? How can people stay in touch?
If you want, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, Gen ZBTC. My nickname is Satoshi Guapamoto, because when you're a Bitcoiner, you get a lot of guap, all right? You get a lot of money, a lot of purchasing power, right? Hey, that's not funny, man. It's the truth, all right? It's the truth.
I
so,
thought you were. I thought that was your handle because it was like the Spanish word for handsome, like guapo. But
now that, hey,
that
listen,
works as well.
that works. It works. Whatever. If it works, then it works. All right. I'm gonna just leave it at that. If it works, then it works. So you can watch my YouTube channel. I try to be a little silly, a little goofy on there. You're not gonna find super fancy content. You're not gonna see no Mr. Beast style editing or anything. And then on X, on Twitter, right, you can find me, same handle, at Gen ZBTC. And if you ever need to DM me about anything, I'm constantly on my phone. That's part of the curse of being in logistics. You can't miss any emails or text. So just reach out to me. I will definitely respond. Even in the YouTube comments, I'll have hundreds of comments. I will be in my bed at night responding to comments, because I love the notoriety. I love being able to talk to people online. So reach out and I'll talk to you. I'm trying to expand my reach. I'll try to get on TikTok and Instagram and all this other stuff. But right now, YouTube and X.
Love it. Well, thank you for sharing your time. It's a pleasure to know you and appreciate you sharing your wisdom with the audience, and can't wait to have you on again.
Let's go. Thank you so much for having me. And just remember, everybody, stack sats or die trying.